Hi, I'm Grace Lynch. Welcome to my channel. Today's video is about the ancestor of archetypes. Um, when 7 years ago, I initiated into the Mankind Project, which is it's a movement that grew. It's a society, a worldwide organization uh, um, to help men be the men that they need to be personally to help contribute to the world and their lives in the way that they are called to do, and men supporting each other in doing that. My understanding is it grew out of the men's movement way back in the 80s and 90s when Joseph Campbell was doing his work on mythology with the Hero of a Thousand Faces, and Robert Bly was doing his work with Iron John and the men's gatherings. There's a wonderful Bill Moyers episode called A Gathering of Men. If you can find it, it's on VHS still. I don't know if you can find it on DVD. In any case, Iron John talked about, if you read it, the time when the boy asked the wild man to take him off because he's scared of his parents. And when I was reading that, I have sexual abuse in my history, so immediately my mind flashed to what that wild man is going to do to that boy out in the woods. And so alongside the narrative inside the story of touching the water and the finger turns gold and the hair turns gold and all the different things. And, the other side of that was trauma experiences that were triggered in terms of how I would see what an older man would do to a younger boy when they were trapped together. And the point isn't about, that's what the story represents. It's about my way of voicing that when I read a narrative, part of it is what I experience cognitively and part of it is what I experience viscerally. Trauma and my particular ways of processing that are somatic or body-based also play a role in the meaning I find in language and stories. The trouble was that when I wanted to engage with other men, talking about men's work mythopoetically, using Iron John narrative, I needed to have part of working mythopoetically is that I have to engage with my own process with it. But part of engaging in a group of men is experiencing how it pans out when I find my voice for my individual processing and share it with others, and then they integrate it, because it takes part in creating a group understanding, which filters back into the individual lives. And when something is too jarring or something, then it makes it impossible for that kind of translation to take place. And I think that this kind of thing can happen when a person of any kind of difference is in a group with people that don't share that difference. But in any case, I needed to continue doing my work with the story. I love the story of it, and I love men's work. And so I had to do a lot of digging to sort out what was going on with me, sort out how I was understanding the wild man, the place in the story. I was identifying as the boy. I wasn't identifying as the wild man. I was trying to get wild energy, but in the story, the wild energy in Iron John is an enchanted king. Part of my desire as a man is to get in touch with my own wild energy. So time passed, and I did my own personal work with stuff, and I also was grappling with being autistic and being aphasic and having to rebuild my relationship with language post-brain rehab. And then I saw a program on Great Courses Plus about big civilizations, and it talked about how the oldest city, continuously existing city, Jericho, that it started it talked about how geology and geological situations on the earth led to the foundations of civilization, where as the ice receded and zones became more temperate, at least equatorial zones, then over time, smaller grasses proliferated, which led to smaller animals being more populated, which decreased the need to migrate. And gradually, people found how to stay in one place. And then that led to homes and family structures and defending a place and not shifting along and not simply going with the flow of nature, but establishing something. And so experiencing that as a response to geological conditions was something that I liked because it helped me sort of sense how higher cognition evolved out of physical processes. We weren't aware of it, of course, but we did that. So the thing that started to give me peace was to consider, like when I was the price of trying to pursue archetypal meaning in groups felt like if I don't get the story right that I talk about in my own work in a way that the group can accept, I feel shunned or I feel like I alienate the other people. But I have to process metapoetically the archetypes the way they make sense to me. And gradually I began to see that my only way that I'd ever found out of narrative-based consciousness is to think about the king, to think about the lover, the warrior, the magician, in terms of stories, a kind of objectified reality. And so I thought of those aspects as things in myself, objectified pieces of myself, so to speak. And it wasn't only difficult because it made me feel like a whole set of puzzle pieces coming together, but it left me in a place that's unsatisfied with working with the archetypes because it doesn't let me truly connect with them. And no matter how hard I tried to connect with them on that basis to participate in Storyland with the groups, it was never satisfied. I wasn't on the same page with the other people, no matter how hard I tried. We seemed to be at odds, narrativistically. And slowly the idea came to me to consider archetypes not as objects, but as functions. And to consider, like, for instance, the king, not to think about it in terms of inside a story or story mind, not to think about it in terms of a context, but imagine that the things we consider to be the archetypes emerged out of people coming together and creating cities, creating homes, creating family structures, no longer having to be nomadic. And then in building their language to relate with each other, they began finding ways to talk about the adaptations that individual people were making to life that affected the emerging society that lasted. A person taking kind of leadership position in a way that helped the society function, the city, the village, the whatever it was function, so that other people became loyal to this person for making decisions on their own, would evolve inside the emerging story mind into the concept of a king, which would become what we think of as archetypes. But a different way to think about it is that the king is not inside the story. Neither is the lover or the warrior. And understanding these things in terms of what they mean contextually or what they mean collectively, for me, misses kind of the power of connecting with what an archetype is. The ancestor of the archetype was people making observations of either how they lived in the world or how someone else did, and creating language to relate to other people to create society. And out of that, what we did first was create stories. But what came before the stories were the functions. And therefore, it makes more sense to look at the wild man, to look at the king, to look at any of these archetypes, and to look at the ancestor that they came from. And I know that my genetic code, my structures existed back then in different shufflings. So in a very real sense, my body is part of what actually happened then, the experiences. And that gives me a way to begin exploring archetypes and where they came from as a direct experience rather than to go circuitously through some narrative, some cognitive construct, which always led me to a feeling of remaining self-objectified, which is very painful and not a way that I wanted to grow. So I don't know if that made any sense, but I thought I'd share it. in 10 minutes for the win. See you next time.